a man with a hook for a hand, a ghost haunting an old suburban house, an axe-wielding maniac lurking in the woods. We usually dismiss these archetypes as harmless fiction, stories engineered to keep children from wandering too far into the forest or to entertain teenagers around a late-night campfire. But occasionally, authorities actually look into the source of these myths, and when they do, they sometimes uncover physical evidence that proves the stories are rooted in something very real. The scariest urban legends are not fiction. They are real-world tragedies and biological anomalies, obscured by a layer of folklore that masks a physical reality hiding in plain sight. In the late 80s, a house in the inner-city suburb of West Hobart, Australia, gained a terrifying reputation. Rumors claimed the property was cursed and that the haunting was driving the residents completely insane. As the family living there descended into delirium, the local community kept their distance. Lacking a logical explanation for the mental collapse occurring behind those walls, locals pointed to ghost apparitions. When authorities finally investigated, they found the culprit wasn't a spirit, but a plant. A datura vine grew through the trees directly above the home, dropping leaves into the family's rainwater tank, microdosing them every single day. Datura, the devil's trumpet, contains potent hallucinogens. Low doses trigger intense delirium, a biological attack indistinguishable from a haunting. Historical cultures deliberately used this toxic plant for extreme painkilling and ritual zombification. In Hobart, it happened by accident. When humans are attacked by an invisible biological threat they cannot see or understand, we invent a ghost. It gives the danger a face. We apply that same reflex to people who completely withdraw from the world. We build legends around figures like Le Lion in Switzerland or the North Pond Hermit of Maine. For decades, the North Pond Hermit was a local boogeyman blamed for over 1,000 cabin break-ins. In reality, he was Christopher Thomas Knight, a teenager who walked into the woods in 1986 and survived in total silence for 30 years. Knight survived 3 decades of brutal winters by executing ghost-like burglaries. He only moved at night, stealing basic necessities like propane and toiletries from nearby cabins, while leaving the owners baffled by the lack of a trace. While Knight was eventually captured, others face a different fate. The Swiss ghost Le Lion was a harmless eccentric who took daily walks in a vintage gas mask for personal happiness therapy. When media exposure ruined their isolation, they left behind a suicide note and vanished. Total voluntary isolation is a psychological state most people find impossible to grasp. Because we cannot understand the desire to be alone, we turn the recluse into a monster. The most extreme myths are built to process actual malice. In 1980s England, rumors surfaced of Purple Aki, a massive figure who allegedly hunted down young athletes to feel their muscles. He was a real person named Akinwale Arobeke, a convicted harasser. Similarly, the Virginia Bunny Man myth stemmed from a real 1970 hatchet attack. These weren't stories, they were warnings about tangible human threats. The most chilling example is Cropsey. On Staten Island, children were told of a scarred, hook-handed maniac who lived in the woods and kidnapped children to deal with his grief. The real Cropsey was Andre Rand. He was a former employee at the Willowbrook State School, a facility notorious for its brutal treatment of children. After his release from prison for an attempted attack, young girls on Staten Island began to vanish. Throughout the 1970s, as children genuinely disappeared, the community leaned into the Cropsey campfire story. It was a way to talk about the danger without naming the predator living next door. Attributing these crimes to a supernatural boogeyman is a community coping mechanism. It's a way to mask the unbearable reality of human evil. A toxic vine in the water, a teenager living in a tent for 30 years, an eccentric walker, a man with a hatchet, and a kidnapper. Why does human psychology instinctively prefer the terrifying ghost story over the factual reality? Because supernatural stories have rules. Monsters stay in the woods, or they only haunt specific bridges at midnight. If you stay away from those places, you are safe. These stories give us an illusion of control. But the truth has no such boundaries. You cannot control the fact that the water you drink might steal your sanity, or that a normal-looking man on your street can take your children in broad daylight. Ultimately, Urban legends serve as psychological shields. They aren't meant to scare us, but to provide a border for the danger, protecting us from a world where the most frightening threats don't wear masks, but walk among us unnoticed.